Hello, everyone. We're going to discuss current affairs from the Hindu newspaper that is 23rd April 2020. I'm Dr. Dilip. To begin with, the first article being Kotak Bank to raise up to 7,800 crore capital equity. So, what is meant by equity capital? Equity capital means something that is earned through issuance of shares. So, here, if you see, the private sector bank, that is the Kotak Mahindra, is going to raise an equity of 7,500 to 7,800 crore by issuing 6.5 crore shares. And these shares are not being issued for the first time, means the Kotak Bank has already issued shares, and whatever remaining shares are there, that is to a value of 6.5 crore shares, are being again issued now. So, which is called as the follow on public offering. So what is a follow-on public offering? So if you see, we have to understand what is meant by initial public offering. Initial public offering or IPO is the first offer or purchase to public. So what purchase? The purchase of shares. So this is a process when an unlisted company raises funds by offering its shares to the public and consequently gets listed on a stock exchange. So here, whenever a company enlists or lists out its shares to the public offering, then it automatically gets listed on the stock exchange because the trade of the particular shares will commence. Then, if the same company comes out with another issue to the public, that is the shares, then the second issue would be called as follow on public offering. So, here, as per the understanding that is reached between the RBI and the promoter of the Kotak Bank, that it says the promoter, being Uday Kotak, should reduce his stake in the Kotak Bank to a 26% from the present amount of 29.9% by September 30. The license given to the Kotak Bank way back in 2003, when it talks about converting the NBFC into a bank and then the merger of the Kotak Bank with the ING Vaishya Bank. Subsequently, the RBI has guided or asked the Kotak Bank's promoter to reduce his stake to 15%. But this could not be achieved, and later Mr. Uday Kotak has approached the court, and then the legal proceeding has started. And later, there has been an understanding between the RBI and the Kotak Bank promoter, and the case being withdrawn. And final, the RBI has given a permission or a plan that Mr. Kotak can reduce his stake to 26% from 29.9%. And to reduce the stake, he is reducing 0.9% by issuance of this shares. And that will be roughly about 6.5 crore. Then we have to understand what is meant by qualified institutions placement. So this qualified institution placement has been created especially to help the companies so that they can raise capital without submitting the legal paperwork. So, which companies are allowed this provision? The companies that are having their stocks listed on the stock exchange can use this ability. The SEBI has put forth the guidelines for this unique avenue in the Indian financing on May 8th, 2006. So, the primary reason being for developing the QIPs was to keep India from depending too much on foreign capital to fund its economic growth. Here, the definition what it says is it is a way for listed companies to raise capital without having to submit legal paperwork to market regulators. So, SEBI has created the rule to avoid dependence of companies on foreign capital. Then, moving on to the next article, it is about the global remittances. So, the World Bank is giving a report that citing world remittances or global remittances will see a sharp fall. So, what is the meaning of remittance? So, if at all an individual belonging to a country moves to another country for employment purpose and starts earning there, and subsequently he is going to send the money to his home country. So, whatever money he sends to his home country for his parents or family that is residing, that is called as remittance. So, in India, it is said, as per the report of the World Bank, that the remittances for 2020 are likely to fall by 23% to $64 billion. So here globally a decline will be about 20% owing to migrants losing jobs and wages because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So if at all you see how it is going to affect the economy. So Indian economy is dependent upon the remittances for the foreign exchange. So by getting valuable foreign exchange, India can significantly reduce its fiscal deficit. India can significantly reduce the foreign exchange crunch. And so whatever remittances that are received by the country are used for financing households and family expenses such as higher education. So now with a decrease in remittances, all these outcomes cannot be met. And especially it will be true in a time where households are tackling food shortages and the financing livelihood needs. So quick actions must be taken in order to make it easier to send or receive remittances, thus providing support will also help the lives of migrants and their families. Then moving on to the next topic. So you all know about the ongoing pandemic. So the confirmed cases crossed 20,000 and nearly 4,000 people recover from the COVID-19 infection. On the Wednesday report, it says that the recovery rate is around 19.36%, means number of individuals who have recovered. So recovery rate can be calculated by the number of people recovered divided by the total number of people infected into 100. So that will be roughly 4,000 divided by 20,000 into 100, which is roughly 20%. So taking all the values, true values in nature, it appears to be 19.36%. So moving on to the next topic. Indian test kits must for reliability. So you might have seen in the news that the kits that are in supply by the ICMR, which ICMR has procured from China, do lack reliability. So ICMR has given an directive to the respective state governments that these kits should not be used for the coming next 2 days. This is because these kits are not reliable. The rapid antibody test kits, which gauge the presence of antibodies in the blood of individual, which are used for surveillance, have been procured on large scale by few state governments from China, but many of these appear faulty and the value cannot be read. It doesn't specify the proper result or outcome of the test. These kits are useless. Now, what ICMR has directed is if at all they give adequate time, wait for 2 days, ICMR is going to utilize this time for calibrating, for checking out whether these kits are truly faulty or how these kits can be used. And also, this article talks about development of home-based kits. So especially if at all you talk about the pregnancy tests that are done by kits. The test is also based on a kit which will detect the levels of hormone, that is HCG. So similarly, those are most reliable. So why can't we develop such kits in our own country? If at all we develop such kits in our own country, those will be more reliable. And also this rapid antibody test kits can be only used in a period between 7 to 14 days from where the symptoms will start to manifest. And here you can see there is no alternative to the PCR technology. The only technology that is confirmatory of the diagnosis of COVID-19 or infection with SARS-CoV-2 or novel coronavirus 2019 is the PCR technique, which is also called as RT-PCR. So moving on, you can see the RT-PCR, which is reverse transcription polymerase chain reaction. So what happens? Initially, a swab is taken from the nose or back of the throat. Then it is sent to the laboratory where from that virus sample, if at all virus is present, the genetic material present in novel coronavirus or SARS-CoV-2 is a single-stranded RNA. An enzyme will be put into the sample which is called reverse transcriptase, which performs the function of reverse transcription. And with reverse transcription, the RNA molecule is going to get converted into a DNA molecule. So simply, if at all we talk about the normal activities that are taking place in the human body, that is transcription. Transcription is nothing but the production of RNA from DNA. The reverse of it is reverse transcription. In reverse transcription, what happens is from RNA, DNA molecule is produced. So if at all in the given sample, the novel coronavirus is present and that will have the genetic material that is single stranded RNA, and that single stranded RNA, when it is exposed to the reverse transcriptase enzyme, it is going to produce the viral DNA molecule. If at all this single DNA molecule is present in the given sample, that is magnified using the polymerase chain reaction. So To magnify it, they will use different nucleotides, primers, and also the fluorescent dyes in order to bind with the DNA, viral DNA, if at all it is present. So in the first cycle of polymerase chain reaction, one DNA molecule will become two DNA molecules, and in the second cycle, two DNA molecules will turn out to be four DNA molecules, and subsequently it keeps on increasing exponentially based upon the binding amount of fluorescent dye that is binded to the DNA or genetic material. If at all the curve increases, that is, the presence of fluorescent dye increases, then the test is said to be positive. If the presence of fluorescent dye is less or constant, remains the same, that means the fluorescent dye is not binding to the DNA molecule because DNA molecule is absent. It is absent because the RNA molecule is absent. Then the test appears to be negative. So this reverse transcription polymerase chain reaction is only the confirmatory test and is the gold standard. Whereas if you see the rapid antibody test, it is used for surveillance. Moving on to the next thing. So foreign attendees under ED lens. So who are these foreign attendees? So these foreign attendees are the attendees who have attended the Tablighi Jamaat meeting in Nizamuddin Markaz. So what is this Nizamuddin Markaz? First talking about Tablighi Jamaat. So what is Tablighi Jamaat? It is a Islamic missionary movement that focuses on exhorting Muslims and encouraging fellow members to return to practicing their religion as it was practiced during the lifetime of the Islamic prophet Muhammad, and particularly in matters of ritual, dress, and personal behavior. In India, it was started, or this Tablighi Jamaat was established around 1926 by Muhammad Ilyas al-Kandhlawi in Meerut region of India. It has initially begun as an offshoot of the Deobandi movement and as a response to perceived deterioration of moral values and a supposed neglect of aspects of Islam. So this movement, that is Tablighi Jamaat, aims for spiritual reformation of Islam by working at grassroots levels. And Tablighi Jamaat denies any affiliations to the politics. So here, this group is accused of a lot of political links. This group expresses a non-violent ideological stance and it is having its international headquarters, which is situated in Nizamuddin Markaz in South Delhi. So this Tablighi Jamaat, which is having its international headquarters at Nizamuddin Markaz, had a religious conference way back in March, and a lot of international attendees have attended. Almost more than 2,000 foreign nationals belonging to 40 countries. So you can see, and most of them belong to Indonesia, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Kyrgyzstan, and Malaysia. And now the Enforcement Directorate, which is responsible for looking into any financial frauds, has taken cognizance of that these people have entered in India illegally on false pretexts of their visas. By utilizing, it is said that they have utilized the e-visa loopholes because the electronic visa simply takes into consideration of the request and approves it. And the Enforcement Directorate is looking if at all there are aspects of money laundering allegations, including financial transactions pertaining to those who came from abroad, that is from the foreign countries. And here the ministry wants to set right any loopholes that are present in the e-visa norms. The Union Ministry of Home Affairs looks into this permission, whether permission has to be granted or not. If at all an individual is coming from Pakistan, then no matter what, the permission or the application of visa will be forwarded to the Ministry of Home Affairs for further verification. And if at all the nationals from Afghanistan, China, or Pakistan for business or any other purpose, even the nations of Afghanistan, Iraq, Nigeria, Somalia, and Pakistan, or those of Pakistani origin, they will also be scrutinized by the Ministry of Home Affairs. Then moving on to the next thing. So the Ministry of Home Affairs tells don't deport foreigners with Tablighi link. Deporting means what? Means sending them to their home countries. So as we have seen, to attend the Tablighi Jama, that is at Nizamuddin Markaz, which is the international headquarters, a lot of foreigners, that is around 2,000 foreigners have entered into India with the tourist visas, and which is totally against the norms. They should have attended or received the religious visas, but they have utilized their tourist visas and then entered into the country and have violated the visa norms, that is overstaying than the period that is prescribed in the visa. So now what the Ministry of Home Affairs is telling is, don't deport them. Deporting means sending them to their home country. Once the lockdown is done and when the international flights are again on the move, these people should not be deported. Rather, these people should be kept within the country, and the security agencies and immigration authorities should take a look about these individuals, and they should be booked under the National Disaster Management Act 2005, Epidemic Diseases Act of 1897, and the Foreigners Act of 1946. Then moving on, if at all you see the script of unity. So as per the call given by Sri Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of India, where he says COVID-19 does not recognize race, religion, color, caste, creed, language, or border, and asks for all the people to stand united in order to face the problem of COVID-19. So here, but instead, the pandemic has fanned the flames of communalism, that is based on religion. There are a lot of problems that have been increased. And the report of the US Commission on International Religious Freedom in it, which is given by UN, has expressed concerns over stigmatization in India. Stigmatization means having a fear or doubt about certain religion. So here, what happens is there has been a lot of allegations in India. Example, that in Ahmedabad, in a hospital, the patients are being discriminated based upon their religion. And there were a lot of hate speeches. Spread of COVID-19 in India has been attributed to Muslims or the Tablighi Jamaat in total by a lot of expats who are residing in the UAE. But if at all that condition has occurred in India, India would have rather ignored. But in UAE, strict action was taken, and a lot of people have lost their job because of this Islamophobia. And the Indian ambassador in UAE has strictly asked the Indian diaspora living there to not be vocal about these things and rather stop spreading hate, but try to win the pandemic by joining hands. And here, there is another thing, that all the people should put away their social prejudices and move forward, or else every strand of humanity will be broken down by the pandemic. It is very unfortunate that people are fueling such wrong negotiated ideas. Moving on to the next thing, the village is still relevant. So here, this article, it especially talks about the condition, the present condition because of the ongoing pandemic of novel coronavirus. So here, this article questions about various policy steps that have been taken as far as the years beginning from 1990. So if at all we see from 1990, the most important sectors of the country, that includes education and primary health, have been slowly turned from public sectors into private sectors, and emphasis or spending by the government on this entities, that is primary health and primary education, have been totally neglected. And it has been a common understanding that these have to be taken forward by the private sector, and if at all there is a need, they have been public private partnerships. But this is not good thing, as we can see the present crisis is exposing a lot of loopholes in the health sector. And apart from this, if at all we see villages, so Mahatma Gandhi has said that villages in India should be self-reliant. But here you see that the villages concept is slowly moving off. That is because we are not thinking on, or the policymakers are not having the idea that they should develop amenities or the requirements in the villages. Rather, they see that it is good to have large slums in the urban areas where people move from rural areas in anticipation of employment opportunities and having the basic needs met. If at all the requirements are present in the village system itself, then the village will be self-reliant and the village will be performing well, where the unnecessary burden on the cities will be reduced. Moving on to the next article, a time for planetary solidarity. So here this article talks about The solidarity means coming together and working together in order to face the global pandemic of COVID-19. This article talks about poorest daily wage laborers and homeless migrants and operators of micro enterprises being worst hit than any other thing. They have been left with, if at all you talk about the physical labor, have been left with zero options unless they are somehow connected with healthcare, food and sanitation. The developed areas, especially this workers who work using the software and internet, they continue having their work. If at all you talk about the educational institutions and universities, they can carry out their teaching program online, and any businesses they can carry on their activities through international video meetings, and all this can happen. But if at all you talk about the blue collar workers, that is laborers, they are mostly affected. And you have to also emphasize that the air travel is not always necessary. So now with an international air travel ban, you can see all people stranded wherever they are, and but still life is going on, they are carrying out their activities. So attend conferences, to attend meetings in various parts of the world, they have been using the air travel. And whenever they use air travel, there will be significant amount of carbon emissions which cannot be ignored, leading to climate change. Now with the lockdown in place, with international travel ban in place, you can still see that a lot of travel has been reduced, which is saving a lot of carbon footprint, thereby which reducing climate change. And it shows that in the normal regular world, that is the pre-COVID-19 situation, where a lot of unnecessary travel used to take place. And you have to see that the post COVID-19 situations should be different. So normally what we are thinking to do is we are always thinking to reduce climate change, and for reducing the climate change effect, we are trying for green alternatives. And how are we using these green alternatives? We are simply applying the greener aspects to the present economy. That is nothing but we are adding a lot of greenery, that is plants, and along with we are using renewable technology and telling that as the green alternative. But you have to understand that unless and until you separate the economic growth and the pollution, not only decoupling environment growth and pollution is needed, but also ultimately decoupling planetary welfare from economic growth. So you all know that economic growth and economic development both are different. So you can't always see that welfare will be coming with economic growth. That is wrong. So once you decouple it and you spend, or the government does spend a lot of things on the welfare of the people, then definitely it is going to benefit the country. And not only that, but also this article emphasizes that all countries should work together in order to achieving a ground playing level where the pandemic can be addressed. Moving on to the next article, there may be no going back. So this article talks about the pre-COVID-19 condition and the post-COVID-19 condition. So this has been compared in China. So if at all you see, there is no chance of the conditions going back to pre-COVID-19, but all the conditions will be different. That is post-COVID-19. So in post-COVID-19 in China, if at all we see, as per the author of this article, the conditions are not similar as before. So though the restrictions on lockdown has been lifted, though life appears to be at normalcy, it is far away from normalcy. So the companies, whatever that are taking in the individuals into the companies for work, are going to continuously screen them. That is, the COVID-19 tests will be conducted, genetic tests, that is RT-PCR will be conducted. And if at all you talk about the international airways, they will start screening individuals. They'll be testing the individuals even before they board on to the aircraft. And at few places, the passengers are asked to wear hazmat suits, which are full body suits. And also, though the restaurants are open, only half percent of the seating is occupied, is allowed to be occupied, and the tables and everything are covered with plastic sheets. And in travel, if at all you are having fever, which is not because of COVID, though you will not be allowed to board into public transport. So the norms will not ever get back to normal, because there is always a fear of this COVID-19 hovering even though the lockdown has been released. Moving on to the next article. Attacks on health workers to attract up to 7 years in prison. So initially, the Indian Medical Association was planning to call a protest for the lot of attacks on the healthcare workers. But seeing that the pressure is mounting upon the government, the Union Cabinet has approved for a promulgation of an ordinance. So you know what is ordinance? When the Parliament is not in session, so that a law can be made. So that is only through by passing an ordinance. So the president has the authority to sign the ordinance. So the Union Cabinet has promulgated an ordinance and it has presented to the president, where the president has given his assent and it has become a law. And this law will continue till the parliament is in session, and immediately this has to be presented and it has to be made into a law. But this will continue hopefully as an ordinance only because it is an amendment that is made to the Epidemic Diseases Act. So, if at all you see, the Union Cabinet on Wednesday approved the promulgation of an ordinance to amend the Epidemic Diseases Act of 1897, making acts of violence against medical staff a cognizable and non-bailable offense. So you have to understand the word cognizable and non-bailable. So non-bailable means you will not be getting the bail, means you can't come out by getting a bail from the jail. And cognizable is that it empowers the police to arrest without a warrant. The police can take cognizance and arrest the individual. And also, the ordinance proposes that in case an attack has been done on the healthcare workers, then the investigation should be completed within 30 days and the decision should be arrived within a span of 1 year. The punishment for such attacks will be for 3 months to 5 years and a monetary fine of 50,000 to 2 lakh rupees. If at all the injury on this individual is a grievous injury. So grievous injury means that the individuals or the healthcare workers will lose their vital organs, that is damage to eye, damage to ear, loss of tooth, fractures, and all this. Those are called grievous injuries. The punishment will be from 6 months to 7 years, and the fine will be from 1 lakh to 5 lakh. And the Union Health Ministry has said that zero tolerance will be maintained as regarding to any violence against the healthcare service personnel. And here, if at all you see about the Epidemic Diseases Act, it was passed in February 1897 in the wake of outbreak of bubonic plague in India, particularly in Bombay Presidency, and has given the draconian powers to the colonial government. The ongoing national lockdown in the wake of global pandemic caused by novel coronavirus has suddenly brought the interesting colonial legislation into limelight. Starting from March 2020, many states in India have enforced the Epidemic Diseases Act 1897 to contain the spread of this disease. So what this act does is, this act gives power to government, both central and state, that if at any time the central or state government is satisfied that the country or a respective state or any part thereof is visited by or threatened by an outbreak of a dangerous epidemic disease, the center or the state government, if it thinks that the ordinary provision of the law for the time being is force or insufficient for this purpose, then they can make by public notice prescribe such temporary regulations to be observed by public and people. So this is about this Epidemic Diseases Act. So it gives the center and state excess power so that they can take actions by which they can temporarily put restrictions on the public and the people, by which they can prevent the spread of disease. And this act was amended by the ordinance put forward by the Union Cabinet so that this attacks on healthcare persons from now attract 7 years in prison. Moving on to the next thing, pre-retirement judgments and post-retirement jobs. So this article takes a note on the jobs received by the highest people in the judiciary. So the Constitution of India provides that the judiciary remains independent, autonomous, not dependent on any others, that is legislature or executive. So people should have trust in the judicial system. Taking that recent example into consideration, that the former Chief Justice Mr. Gogoi has been given the post of member of Rajya Sabha by the president nominating him to that post, which has been offered by the BJP government. So by Mr. Gogoi accepting that offer, it creates a negative impact on the idea in the minds of public that his pre-retirement judgments have been based upon the post-retirement job. So because Mr. Gogoi has given out the most important verdicts, that is the Ayodhya verdict and Rafale verdict, which were in favor of the Indian government. So this article asks that a legislation should be made immediately in order to prevent such appointments, thereby which the trust in the people regarding the judiciary remains intact. Moving on to the next thing, the cabinet approves 15,000 crore package, especially to limit the spread of virus. This is a three-phase plan. See, in the initial phase, the amount that will be used is 7,774, and the rest will be used for medium-term support, especially keeping things in mind of the mounting emergency response to slow and limit COVID-19. And what is this amount going to be used for? So it is going to be used for developing diagnostics and COVID-19 dedicated treatment facilities, centralizing the procurement of essential medical equipment, and strengthening the healthcare systems and nationally and in states, biosecurity preparedness and pandemic research. The research and development in India, the amount of money that is spent is hardly less than 1% of GDP. That is roughly 0.8% of GDP or even low in the present scenario. So now the government is trying to increase its spending where the pandemic research will also be carried on, which will be very much beneficial to the country in future. Then moving on to the next topic, no 100% quota for tribal teachers, tells Supreme Court. So, based upon the idea of the 1993 judgment in Indra Shawni versus Union of India case, where the Supreme Court has observed that the total number of reserved seats or positions cannot exceed 50% of what is available. But in tribal areas of Andhra Pradesh and several other states, you can see 100% quota for tribal teachers, where no other individual belonging to the scheduled caste or backward caste is allowed. So the five judges constitution bench of the Supreme Court held it unconstitutional to provide 100% reservation for tribal teachers in schools located in scheduled areas across the country. Justice Arun Mishra has observed that it is an obnoxious idea to have only tribals teach tribals when there are other locals residing there. Why they cannot teach is not understandable, and the action defies logic and is arbitrary. Merit cannot be denied in toto by providing reservation. Further direction has been given that this 100% quota should be removed. Moving on to the next topic, center state can fix sugarcane price, says Supreme Court. Because the price of sugarcane is present in the concurrent list as observed by the Constitution Bench of Supreme Court, it has directed that the price of the sugarcane can be decided or can be fixed both by center and state. But whatever price that the state government has fixed, it cannot be the minimum price. State cannot fix a minimum price if the center has already fixed it. Assume that in sugarcane or any commodity, if the central government has fixed a price and later the state government is going to give the minimum price, that is not acceptable. The minimum price given by the state government should always be more than the central government, thereby which it cannot be called as a minimum price. Fair and remunerative price of the sugarcane, it is the minimum price at which sugarcane is to be purchased by sugar mills from the farmers. And who is going to set it? It is going to be set by the union government as recommended by Commission for Agriculture Costs and Pricing, which is attached to the Union Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare. Moving on to the next thing, the principal economic advisor says most sectors will be open by May 3rd. So, as a phase wise lifting of lockdown is being done, or ease of the restrictions imposed by the lockdown are being done, So the principal economic advisor says that this will be achieved in a step-by-step manner and it will be achieved by May 3rd. Moving on to the next thing. Facebook buys rupees 43,574 crore of stake in Jio platforms. That is 9.99% stake in the Mukesh Ambani led Jio platforms of Reliance Industries Limited. So this is one of the largest investments in the technology sector by a foreign organization so far. The Facebook in the near future is going to invest in JioMart and which will empower roughly 3 crore small Indian Kirana shops to digitally transact with every customer. Moving on to the next thing. The Jawaharlal Nehru Tropical Botanic Garden and Research Institute is going to play a key role in sequencing the Indian species. So here Indian species will include the Indian plants and animals. So you can see the Jawaharlal Nehru Tropical Botanic Garden and Research Institute, which is situated in Thiruvananthapuram of Kerala, which was founded in the year or established in the year of 1979, is gearing up to play a key role in nationwide project to decode the genetic information in all species of plants and animals in the country. So what is the benefit by decoding the genetic material or a genomic code of all the plants and animals? So by understanding all the genomic code of plants and animals, what happens is in future you can develop newer varieties of plants which are resilient to climate change, which are resilient to pests, and you can protect those in a gene bank also. And the project will enable collection and preservation of endangered and economically important species. That is the most important thing. And the decoded genetic information will also be useful tool to prevent biopiracy. So biopiracy means what is happening? The trade in this biological components, that is plants and animals, by which some exotic organisms or endangered organisms will be totally lost from the face of earth. This can be prevented. So the institute has been selected as one of the biological knowledge. Which institute? That is Jawaharlal Nehru Tropical Botanic Garden and Research Institute has been selected as one of the biological knowledge and research centers of the Indian initiative on the Earth biogenome sequencing. This is all about the topic. The last one is fundraising to get easier for stressed firms. So you can see the Securities and Exchange Board of India, which is entrusted with to protect the interests of investors in securities and to promote the development of and to regulate the securities market for matters connected therewith, or established in the year of 1992 based upon the Securities and Exchange Board of India Act 1992. The SEBI has made it easier for the listed and stricken companies. Listed means their shares have been given and that their name is present in the national stock exchange or the stock exchange, any of the stock exchange, and it is stricken means out of cash, having problem. So this any of the listed stricken companies can easily raise money from potential investors. So that can be done because of the relaxation of the pricing norms for preferential allotment by such companies, while also exempting investors in such issuances from making open offers if they acquire a substantial stake in the listed entity. So here you should understand, SEBI tries to see that there is no preferential allotment. That is the first thing you have to understand. So when shares are being given, preferential allotment is not allowed. But here, because there are stressed firms. So stressed firms here, what does that indicate is to define a stressed firm, you have to see into the things that are given or three criteria, namely default on the payment obligations for 2 consecutive quarters. If at all a company is defaulting on its payment obligations for 2 consecutive quarters, and the credit rating of listed securities have downgraded to D. So it's not so good. The security has not been graded as good. And existence of intercreditor agreement in terms of Reserve Bank of India. So what happens is it can preferentially allot a large chunk of shares, that is about 25% of its shares, to any company on preferential basis. If an individual or a company is coming forward to invest in the stressed firm, then about 25% of the company can be given in a preferential way. And once that is done, the company which has invested in in the stressed firm can further give an open offer of 26% of shares. If at all you add 25% and 26, it becomes 51%. So if it is 51%, it means the person who is investing is going to become the head or the chairman or the owner of the firm. So this 25% of the shares can also be asked in open offer. There is no obligation for trust firms. If at all the minority stakeholders are also approving this move. In a normal company, the preferential allotment is not allowed for shares. And if at all allotment of shares has been done and some company or some individual has acquired 25% of the shares, they cannot make an open offer for further 26% of shares. Here, this norms or this relaxation has been brought only for stressed firms. As per the recent article that is published in the Hindu, it states that more than 50 companies which are listed among the top 100 companies of National Stock Exchange have been said to be facing lot of uncertainty, so that there are chances that they can become stressed firms. In case they become stressed firms, what is the bailout, what is the way they can survive, that has been provided by the Securities and Exchange Board of India. So with this we end the topic. Thank you.